on the economy and investing. My name is Isaac. I'm your Senator of Finance from ASGCC, and I want to thank you all for coming this afternoon. And I'd like to let everybody know that the closed captioning and ASL interpreting are both available today. We have our interpreter, Kim, listed as interpreter, and you can pin her video by pressing the 3 dots in the corner of her video and in order to pin the video. And so we also have our closed captioner, Mark, who is going to be providing us with the CCs today. And so to see the closed captioning, you just need to press on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. I'd also like to remind everybody that there is going to be $250 in Amazon gift cards being given randomly out today. And so just fill out the WUFO form that I'm going to put in the chat in order to run in that raffle. So this is the link to the WUFO form. And last but not least, any questions that come up during the presentation can be sent to me, and we'll have time to answer them at the end. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Wesley Walton, CEO of the Glendale Area School Credit Union. Wesley, thank you for being here today.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Thank you, Isaac. So this is the 4th one that we've done. For those of you who have attended the previous 3, thank you very much. You are troopers. Let me go ahead and pop up my screen share, and so you can all see my presentation. So, financial literacy series, the economy and investing post-election. Apparently, initially I thought it would be post-decision, but apparently the post-election moniker was more accurate. So we're after the election. We may not have a full decision yet, but we can still talk about the various and sundry things that we know of so far. So this is my standard disclaimer. Like I say, this is a free talk. And if you need professional advice, by all means, please get it. Don't just rely on what I have to say. In America, anyone can become president. That's just one of the risks you have to take. So, getting on to the election. Generally, if it's a Republican victory, which we don't know precisely if it's going to be yet, Republicans generally have lower taxes, lower regulation, increase in defense spending. If Trump gets reelected, we'll probably have a trade fight with China and probably have a modest pandemic relief bill. And how much money the government throws at the pandemic relief may affect the economy and helping it get it started again. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Traditionally, a Democratic victory, higher taxes, more regulation, increase in social programs. If you get Biden elected, there'll probably be a new healthcare option. They'll probably resurrect some sort of Obamacare. And also there'll be significant pandemic relief. I'm sure Nancy Pelosi will provide something in the House and Biden will promise to sign it. Okay, so the big question is, well, what about what we call divided government, right? And that's kind of where it looks like we are at today. In the thought process of divided government, you have the Senate keeping the skewing Republican. You have the Democrats keeping the House. So whether or not you have a Democrat or Republican presidency, you have the House leaning one way, you have the Senate leaning another way. Therefore, by default, you have divided government. Divided government could also be if the one party holds the Congress, Senate, and House, and the other party is president. That's the other way to get, quote, divided government. So anyway, if you have divided government, you generally have more compromise. You have a balanced pandemic relief, you have minimally new regulations, and a stable business environment. We've had divided government for a while now when the Democrats took over the House, and it's something that's very business friendly because businesses love status quo. My comment there about the, when I say stable business environment, I'm sure there will be some instability if Trump wins. Instability isn't necessarily a bad thing all the time, but we will see. So here's we are. I just pulled these off the internet 5 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago. We have Joe Biden with 264, Donald Trump with 214. They say 270 to win. So the question is, are these the people actually deciding the election? And the answer is no, they're not. But traditionally, they don't make calls unless they're pretty darn sure that the electoral college votes are going to go towards either one candidate or the other. So this is where the popular media is telling us we are today. We are in the Senate. So the Senate appears to be a toss-up. We've got 48 versus 48, 100 senators total. A third of them are elected each and every year. However, here, I believe the remaining 4 races, the Republicans seem to be leading in 3 out of those 4 races. So the likelihood of the Senate going Republican is pretty strong at this point. So North Carolina, Georgia at least, and then Alaska. Those 3 races here, they're too close to call, but they're leaning Republican at this time. So it looks like the Republicans will have a 51 vote majority in the Senate if everything holds, and that means gridlock. If it was 50 to 50, for those of you who want a civics lesson, which we'll get into more a little bit later, 50-50, if it's a 50-50 split in the Senate, the vice president breaks the tie, and in essence, we would not have divided government at that time. House, currently 208 to 190, and the likelihood of the Democrats continuing to hold the House is very, very strong. So that's, that's where we're at today there. Okay, so the president, right? The president needs 270 to win. How do we know it's 270? There are a total of 538 total electors. So you need 50%, 269 plus 1. And that's how we get to 270. The 238 is 100 senators, 435 congressional seats, and then we get 3 extra votes from the District of Columbia. So once again, deadlines to keep in mind. So what happens is each state determines the electors and what happens with those electors. We have in 48 states, we have the winner take all, which means that whoever wins the state gets all of the electors for that state. We have 2 states that distribute electors based upon congressional districts, Maine and Kansas, I believe. So, but generally it's a winner take all thing. December 14th, all the electors will, okay, remember the Electoral College is more of a process than an event. All these 538 people don't get together. 538 people gather at their states, generally their state's Congress or House or wherever their state capital is, and then they vote. And on December 14th is when those electors will vote. They will send those votes to a joint session of Congress on January 6th. And then on the joint session of Congress on January 6th, that is when the Senate pro tem, I believe, declares the winner. If someone gets more than 720 votes in the Electoral College, declares the winner and now president-elect. So no matter what the media says, there technically is no president-elect until January 6th. So even in landslide victories, they'll start calling the guy president-elect, whether or not, well, technically he's not president-elect yet. That actually occurs officially on January 6th. Once again, back on December 14th, the states will decide who those electors are and they will vote there. So if you're talking about legal challenges and recounts and all that other good stuff, it can get stretched out to December 14th. But on December 14th, that's when they have to do, somebody has to determine who the electors are, and then they will vote. They only get 1 vote, right? So on January 6th, guess what? If for some reason somebody does not get the 270 to win, then it goes to the House of Representatives, where each state gets 1 vote, and the House decides who's president, and the Senate decides who's vice president. I don't know if that's ever happened. When the House votes, they choose from the top 3 vote getters, which is interesting, which would be an interesting thing. In a 2-party system, we generally only have 2, but theoretically, we could have 3 possibilities if nobody gets a majority, and so then the House would choose amongst those 3. And then finally, January 20th, the new president is sworn in. Couple little interesting facts is that This joint session of Congress on the 6th, it's the new Congress. The new Congress gets seated on the beginning of January, and so probably, I guess, the 3rd. And so the new Congress will be in session on January, and they will decide if they don't have a majority of electors on the first vote, then it'll be interesting. An interesting first day if you just got elected to the House of Representatives and you're there on the 6th.
Wesley, it does look like we have a question in chat.
Sure, absolutely. Yes.
The question is, I think from a little bit earlier, it's just, isn't the Congress Republican leaning?
The Congress is not Republican leaning. The Senate is Republican leaning. 2 houses of Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives. There are 100 senators. There is 335 representatives. Congress is split. One house is Democrat, the other house is Republican. Because there's less senators, there's generally more prestige surrounding the Senate. The Senate also is the one that hears the advising consent on nominations. So right now, the Congress is set to be split, which will indeed split the government. So more likely than not, due to North Carolina, Georgia, and Arkansas going Republican, we'll have 51 Republican and probably 49 Democrat at the end of the day.
Looks like you answered the question. I see an okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions regarding civics lesson? How our Congress is going to work in the days that really matter. December 14th, January 6th, and January 20th. These are this right here is the deadline. If they don't get their stuff together by the 14th, who knows what's going to happen. But it's a full month away, right? So they still have some time, and we'll see what happens. That's why generally people concede elections, and then everyone can move on with their life. So now we talk about investments in the economy. Well, let's take a look. So the good, the bad, and the ugly in the economy. The good, housing. Housing is apparently doing really well. So here is the Case-Shiller. They provide the average house in the largest 10 metropolitan areas, in the 20, composite 20, and then the national index. So you can see, by the way, that the housing prices have recovered. They recovered in about 16, 17, and now we are above where we were at that time during the Great Recession, the housing bubble. So we had a housing bubble, we had the Great Recession, crashed, and then now we're back at levels higher than where we were during 2007, 2008. So housing looks pretty good. Existing home sales, yes, we dipped due to the coronavirus, but we recovered. So the housing sales are above 6,000 units, not quite touching where they were during the height of the the bubble burst before the Great Recession, but we're really close to where we were, right? Existing home inventory. This is relates to home sales. Obviously, if your inventory is low, and it is today, it's kind of like laws of supply and demand. So when your inventory is low, generally the price of your house is on the increase because there's a lot of buyers and not a lot of sellers. This peak here was right kind of at the crash, and this is more after the crash. We had a lot of sellers and not a lot of buyers. So here's the inventory. So a lot of inventory here, and then prices collapsed. Not a lot of inventory here, prices are going up. So technically our inventory level is, way below before the Great Recession. So we are a very, very thin inventory, and it's been thin for a while. I'm sure that the people that are thinking about listing their house hasn't because of COVID. So all those people that kind of want to maybe move, they haven't listed their houses, and so they have brought inventory down. And once again, low inventory, more buyers than sellers, prices go up. Law of supply and demand. The good news, home ownership rates. So during right before the Great Recession, we had a lot of people who owned homes, and generally home ownership rate's a good thing, or anything north of 67 is a pretty good rate. Traditionally, we've been down in the 63 to 65 range. Obviously, this was inflated home prices and kind of drove up the bubble a little bit, but I don't know, home ownership is generally a good thing, so we're glad to have that. New home sales. So in addition to existing home sales, which is what we were looking at, we have new home sales. So the blue bar is last year, the red bar is this year, up through September. And as you can see, recently, new home sales have really outpaced last year's volumes. So a lot of people are having houses constructed and buying those newly constructed houses. Homeowner vacancy rate, not a lot of vacancy in homes. You know, obviously during the recession, home vacancy ran up because there was a lot of people in foreclosure and all the other good stuff or bad stuff. But now we have a very, very low home vacancy rate. So if there's a house that's out there, it's more likely than not occupied. Rentals. So for those of you who are renting, during the recession, vacancy rates went above 10%. Now they're below 6. So not a lot, or actually they just came off of 6s, so about 6.5. So not a lot of vacancy in single family residences, SFRs, not a lot of vacancy in apartments. Interestingly enough, so the question is, okay, are people paying their rent? The good news is, for the most part, yeah. Basically, the solid line is the darkest line is people paying on time. The cream colored line or the beige colored line is people paying by the 13th, and then ultimately paying by the 20th. So back in 2019, that was running between 92 and 94%, call it. And now, while it's in the 90s, it's in the 90s. You know, not a lot of people have stopped paying rent due to the COVID. So that's actually very good news. I would have anticipated a larger decrease in people paying their rent, but the good news is no, actually people are keeping up with their rental payments. So the good continue. Car manufacturers, right when the COVID hit, the sales of new cars and actually the production of new cars went away as factories closed and people were sheltering in place. Now it looks like they pretty much rebounded a lot faster than what people thought. So let's see. You know, the car industry knows a lot about boom and busts. 6 months ago, they were saying, oh my gosh, how much cash do we have left? Are we going to survive? And now it's like, hey, everything's doing pretty good. So if you want to look at production, during April and May of the COVID crisis, production basically dropped off a cliff. And then now it's back up to a normal level of production. And then their stock prices have recovered. For those of you who are invested, if people bought them when they dipped and were lucky enough to hold, they've recovered a lot of their value since they were down earlier this year. So the pace of new cars, new vehicle sales have gotten quite a bit. So here's the pace over the last several years. The pace is pretty blistery at 17 million units a year. Obviously, with the COVID, it dropped right off. But you know what? We are right back where we are before. So the car industry, for all intents and purposes, has recovered, which is a good thing. A lot of industry in that car manufacturing. Speaking of the good, once again, Los Angeles ports are busy. This is the loaded in and loaded out. So here are the exports out of the LA port, and here are the imports. So this is seasonal. Everyone drops off their shipments at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year. You know, post-Christmas shipment blues, and then during the summer they restock, and then they restock right before Christmas. So you've got a lot of Christmas shipping, and that's why this cycles back and forth. Anyway, long story short, as you can see, our ports are pulling in massive amounts, the highest that they ever have. So if you're looking at port activity as a sign of import strength, a lot of things are being imported currently. Also, the vaccine is under development. It looks like we're going to get something in the first quarter of 2021. So there's the good news. So there are things to be happy about in our current economy. However, the bad, there's a whole lot of stuff that is not good about the economy. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Here is our positive tests, 7-day average. We are through where we were in July. So we are definitely having a lot more positive tests than we used to have. However, one of the reasons why is we're testing more, but the raw numbers say we're getting a lot more positive tests than we used to. Okay. more to, okay, all these, what do they call them? These are, they don't like, they're not direct dollars into GDP, but all these things indicate how the industry is doing. So for instance, if you talk about hotel occupancy, on a normal year, the hotel occupancy will be somewhere between 60 and 70%, right? During the end of the year, it trails off. This is what happened during COVID. It went from a 60% occupancy rate, so we were having a very good year, all the way down to barely over 20%. Now remember, 2009 was a very lean year. That was in the height of the recession, the Great Recession, and we had 50% occupancy rates. You can see how COVID just tanked by a large factor from even the Great Recession. They really haven't recovered. Yes, they recovered. They're about half, 50%. But look, they're used to being up in the 60. Well, they're used to being above 60, almost 70% at this time of the year. But we're still under 50%. So if you're in the hotel industry, Vegas is closed. A lot of businesses are closed. Business travel. So all your hotels next to your major airports. Normally, if you go down to LAX, all those hotels are somewhat full. Today, because of a lack of business travel, not a lot of occupancy in those hotels near LAX. Interestingly enough, hotels and resort destinations are doing a lot better. So they're doing better than the average, but the business traveler is pretty well non-existent at this point. TSA, how are the airlines doing? Here is where we were in 2019. The blue line, 80%, call it capacity. We can't even get above 30% capacity. So we are definitely a lot lower than where we were the previous year on how many people are flying. So almost, barely anybody flying. So it's gone up from where it was, but still we are just nowhere close to where we used to be. And that's the sad thing. Okay. This is basically, who's this from? This is the little open table. So people making reservations through open table. In Florida, they almost got back to where they were pre-COVID levels, but have since fallen back. During March and April, nobody was making any reservations because restaurants were shut down. Obviously, these metropolitan areas opened up. We are the dark blue line, so we've opened up, and we're doing in the middle of the pack, so to speak. Definitely not as hot as Texas and Florida, but still nowhere near the back to normal. So we are still down 40%. This is called an anecdotal evidence. This is anecdotally, we're still down 40%. So from the volume that we used to have pre-COVID. Movie sales in theaters, right? The theaters were closed for a very, very long time. This is the maximum. This is the minimum. This is what they normally do. The theaters are dead, and I don't know when they're ever going to come back. I assume they're going to come back eventually, but it sucks to be them at this point. Okay, so moving over, like I say, we saw some positive results from our housing. Inventory is down, prices are up, but is that the calm before the storm? Here is a chart of the delinquency rates, right? So during the Great Recession, we had delinquency rates for Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae buys a lot of loans, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. These two are what we call GSEs, government-sponsored enterprises. They buy a lot of the real estate market. Their delinquency rate was 4% and 5% during the Great Recession. Guess what? They are pretty close. They're above 3% now. They're not quite as bad as where they were, which is good news. The bad news is on the next slide. So there today, the raw numbers are they've got 3%, north of 3% in the plus 90 days. These are houses that may go into foreclosure. They should be under 1%. That's not a bad place to be. After the Great Recession, they got under 1% again. But and now they're because of the recession, because of COVID, they bounce back up to 3%. Could they be higher? The answer is absolutely. This is a graph of forbearance. Basically, forbearance is both the lender and the borrower have agreed that the borrower doesn't have to pay for a particular moment in time. So if you called up your Fannie Mae sponsored loan and you said, hey, I'm out of work because of COVID, can I pay you in 90 days? They would say yes. That period is a forbearance period. People do that normally. So if you, for instance, you had a job loss or you needed some forbearance, you can work out a payment arrangement with your lender ahead of time. And this is Fannie, Freddie, and Ginnie. So this is mortgage loans. So that was very low before the pandemic. Obviously, during the pandemic, it went way up. So Fannie and Freddie is that 3.72%, and other people did other forbearance efforts. But the question is, how much of this 3.72% is going to go into the delinquency category? Now, not all of it, but I don't know, a third of it maybe. So maybe the true delinquency rate isn't 3%. We're up here back to where 4% is. But anyway, it won't be this full 3.72%, but it is pretty significant. If nothing changes in people's lives, then easily this forbearance percentage could translate into delinquencies, and that means eventual foreclosures. So, the other bad news is the commercial real estate. A lot of your Googles not only are your Googles of the world and your Facebooks of the world and your Twitters of the world, they're not having their people work in their downtown buildings in San Francisco and Los Angeles. A lot of other metro areas have shut down their high rises. So when you look here, DC, New York, Chicago, Houston, everybody has basically exited the downtown areas, the urban areas. People are working from home. And the question is, are they going to stay home forever? And the answer is, I don't know, but it looks like we have a permanent shift away from our urban centers. Principally these people here are, the people who are not working, who used to work here, are working from home in most of these cases. But commercial real estate occupancy is way down. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So the ugly is the employment situation. Got a couple of graphs on here. So here's the unemployment rate. So right after so obviously during times of recession, oh, by the way, just so you know, the recessions are blue bars. So a blue bar means that this is the official recessionary period that has occurred. And so the red line is the unemployment rate. After a recession, we have a high unemployment, and then it works itself down as we recover. So in comparison to previous unemployment rates, we almost hit 15%. We were north of 14%. And last time it got as high as 10%. This is a huge difference. We've recovered all the way to 8%. So we've recovered quite a bit, but we aren't where we were, which is 3.5%, 4%. We're lower than we were during the Great Recession, but we'll continue forward with the presentation. I literally have printed this graph off and shown it to my own kids. This is the unemployment rate by level of education. If you are a 4-year degree person, generally your unemployment is a lot lower than the person that just has some degree. So those of you who have some college and maybe an AA degree, your level's here. Those of you who graduate high school are here, and then we have the less than a high school diploma. So the more educated you are, the more employable you are, therefore your unemployment rate will be a lot lower. So it's good that we have people with the GCC because, like I say, over time, you're just more employable and you'll be out of work less often than people with less education. It's hard to hear sometimes if you are a degree person and currently unemployed, but your chances look a lot better than the person who doesn't have a degree. Back to unemployment. So really, while the unemployment rate jumped from 4% all the way up to 14%, a better measure perhaps is the unemployed for over 26 weeks, right? So this is people who've been unemployed for a while. 26 weeks is half a year, 6 months. So obviously, if you were unemployed during the Great Recession, you're probably unemployed for a very long time. And this graph shows that. We haven't been into this pandemic squeeze for more than 6 months. So we're not, the unemployment numbers over 26 weeks aren't that negative yet, but simply because it could just be a matter of time, because once again, this is 6 months in. So we're not quite 6 months in, and obviously we're growing a little bit, so it doesn't look that good, but for the long-term unemployment isn't that bad yet, and hopefully people will get back to work and it won't get that bad. Okay, so this graph here just kind of gives you an impression. Here are all of the recessions. So we had a recession in 7, in 2001, in 90, in 81, in 80, 74, etc. And here is the employment. So when we have a recession, employment dips and then it recovers. Dips and recovers, dips and recovers. Sometimes you take a look at 1948, it was a hard dip and then it recovered really quickly. If you take a look at 2001, it didn't dip as much, but it took a long time for it to recover to the point of where it was when the recession began, right? So during the Great Recession, 2007, it took a long time to lose a whole bunch of jobs, but a whole bunch of jobs were eventually lost. And then here's that glide path Obama era recovery. It was slow, it was steady. It took us a very long time. It took us 78 months to get all the jobs back that we lost. But number one, we got them all back. And number two, unemployment rate at this far in the cycle was, at full employment rates, which was, 4 or 5% unemployment rate. So that was good. So where we are today. So here, I mean, it just dwarfs everybody else, right? It goes from where we were right before the recession all the way down to almost -15, -14.5. And here we are today, right? We're still at -7. So we're recovery, this is a sharp down and a sharp recovery, but the question is, where do we go from here? Do we continue to go up and it resolves in 2 years, or does it stretch it out for, 78 months, 5, 6, 7, 8 years? So who knows? But happy to see this recovery here, but it could be a long way to go before we get to the employment level that we were at before the recession began. Local government, but generally local governments don't cut a lot of jobs during recessions. This time it wasn't the case. So while your non-farm people cut a lot and then they've recovered a little bit, your local government has cut jobs and really hasn't hired a lot of people back. Unemployment claims. So we look at unemployment claims as a precursor to unemployment rates and such. This is so far high, it doesn't make sense to even look at this graph because you can't really tell what's going on because of this is just such an anomaly. Here is the same graph, only now we brought it back to the point of where we're at today. So we're currently filing 800 claims, weekly unemployment claims today. That is by far above where we were during the height of the Great Recession at less than 700, 650-ish, call it. We are, just under 800. We should be, under a normal period of time, you're looking at 300 to 400 claims per week. We are twice that. So we have a long way to go with initial claims. This is continuing unemployment claims. So these are the people that filed and then continued. Same story here. We're still at levels above where we were during the Great Recession. So the good news is housing's still going good. Automobile sales are back. Good things going on there. The bad is there's a lot of people still hurting, travel, entertainment, that type of thing. And then kind of like, we'll try and summarize, quote, what does it all mean? What the market dislikes more than bad news is uncertainty. That's why as we got, today's the election, the virus, and employment. Today, we don't know what's going to happen with, well, the good news is that some of the uncertainty has been resolved. It's very likely that we're going to have a divided Congress, and that means status quo. So that means that a lot of businesses can plan around that situation. They won't have to worry about undue regulation. They won't have to worry about the government. I mean, the government is going to produce some sort of pandemic relief, but it'll probably be modest. It'll be reasonable. It won't be too far one side or the other. So that's kind of in the middle of being resolved. At this point, obviously, we're going to have a different White House if one party wins versus the other. But because we have a split Congress, that's going to buffer or filter what can happen moving forward. The virus. The virus is probably the biggest thing going to affect the economy moving forward. And then the final one is unemployment. So let me get to my take. Wesley's thoughts to think on. COVID is greater than the election results. No matter who wins the election, no matter who's eventually in the Oval Office, that'll have some impact on the economy, but the virus is going to have a larger impact on the economy than who wins the election. So that's why we spent most of our time talking about what's happened since the virus and what we're going to do to move forward. So I think we're going to have a second wave of infections. That's happening globally. A lot of the global, Europe and such are shutting down a second time to try and stave off the infection rate. That is going to have an impact on their economy and by reference our economy. So the virus thing is, we are not over with the virus. We're just in the middle of that event. While we will bounce off the bottom, the recovery is going to be slow. We won't just come roaring back during a normal recovery cycle. The recovery will be slow. It'll be kind of like the Great Recession. We had a Great Recession and we had a growing economy for a very long time, actually, a longest on record, but it was a slow growth. It was not a quick growth. So what else is out there? Stock market correction, commercial real estate, that's not going to go well. Residential real estate, there might be correction out there. We'll take a look. Okay. So normally, like I say, you have a recession, you recover. You have a recession, you recover. You have a recession, you recover. Well, here during the Great Recession, we had a little bit longer of recovery before we got back to where we started the recession, right? This is, so where are we today? Well, while we had a very good third quarter, we were coming off huge lows. So not quite, we're on the pace to recover, but we're nowhere near, where we should be on the recovery side. But bright spots. So let's go through what's the good news on the virus front. So here's the tests versus positives, right? So we are testing a lot more, yet the positives are still hanging out in a certain fashion, right? So 7-day rolling average. So, that's not too bad, right? Hospitalized versus new cases. So here we had the red line is hospitalizations. A lot of hospitalizations with not a lot of new cases. Here, new cases jumped, hospitalizations jumped. Okay, that makes sense. But now we're here, right? Hospitalizations are relatively flat and the new cases have jumped. So this indicates that the younger people who might be testing positive, they're not needing to go into the hospital. That's a explanation for this right here. So rolling day average. So while we are getting a lot more new cases, the good news is they are not resulting in hospitalizations. And along the same front, these are deaths. So while we are getting new cases, lower hospitalization, and even basically flatlining and declining death rate. So we may start not looking at tests or not looking at positives. You may still look at hospitalizations because they went up a little bit, but even with this increase in hospitalizations, the death rate, it's very good. It's maintaining, it's never good to have a death rate, but if you have a death rate in something, having it be flat and on a slight decline, not a bad place to be. So the question is, economy and investing, where do I invest? Successful investing is anticipating the anticipation of others. John Maynard Keynes, Keynesian economics. Smart guy. This is my opinion of what is the current, I'll call it conventional wisdom. So if I had to invest today, where would it be? I would hit consumables, grocery stores, any place that's got a good online presence, home improvement stores. So people are staying home more because of the COVID. Therefore, your Home Depot and your Lowe's are doing well because people are fixing up their houses. If you've got a grocery store, people are not eating out, but they are buying food and preparing it themselves. Residential home builders. Look, you've got a lot of people who are exiting the urban centers. They're exiting downtown San Francisco. They're exiting downtown LA, especially from San Francisco. If you work for Google, you don't have to live there anymore. You can work from home. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to go and buy yourself a new home in a less costly area. So those residential home builders, that's why you saw that big uptick in new home construction and new home closures, because that's what's happening. So I'm taking my pretty sizable salary from Google, and now I'm able to go to other states, heck, even other countries, and get more for my money on housing. And so therefore, residential home builders will have a lot of building to do moving forward, right? Drug companies. Somebody's going to make it big with the vaccine, right? So if you want to do a little gambling, Vegas is closed. Try the stock market and some drug companies, right? Because, like I say, someone's going to be very profitable because they're going to be the ones with the it vaccination, and they'll make some dollars. But remember, I'm just an accountant. I'm just telling you what I've learned. I am not a professional. I could be wrong. But if I was going to do something, I would avoid commercial real estate. There's a significant shift out of urban centers. Commercial real estate will be down for several years to come. I mean, eventually it will recover, but I think that recovery is not months, but years away. Travel and tourism. Business travel is pretty much dead, and we don't know. I mean, some business travel will come back, but not like it was before. So vacation spots actually are doing pretty well, or at least reasonable. But if you're talking about, if you're in a hotel, if you're a hotel business near an airport, yeah, you're toast for the foreseeable future. When we get a vaccine, some people will take it, some won't. If you're not going to take the vaccine, you're probably not going to be traveling either for vacation or business. But if you take the vaccine, you may be comfortable traveling, but that's still a fraction of what it used to be. Shopping malls. Have you been to the mall recently? Other than the Glendale Galleria, or more so the Glendale Americana. The Americana is actually not too bad. They can still walk around outside, and everyone's not too hyper about that. But I would not. There's a lot of REITs, real estate investment trusts, that own a lot of shopping malls. I would not invest in them because I think the malls are pretty well toast. Yeah, so, and if you are a store that basically is centered on malls, if you're a Sears or a Macy's or a Nordstrom's, I'm thinking you're probably not going to do well moving forward, especially if you're one of the interior stores, your Gaps of the world, your Forever 21s, I don't know, Spencer's Gifts. There's a plethora of mall, Abercrombie and Finch. There's a plethora of stores that have put themselves in a lot of malls across the country. Even the anchor stores have access from the outside. The interior stores are not. Unless you've got a strong online business, I don't see those retailers doing a lot of, they're going to be filing for bankruptcy, and it's not going to be pleasant. So, okay, so let's talk about wild cards. The Federal Reserve has lowered interest rates a lot, and that has caused market interest rates to go down. So we have cheap money on mortgages and such. Bubbles. Do we have a bubble in the stock market? I don't know, maybe. The tech stocks have produced a lot of the gains you see recently in the markets. And so my question is, there might be a bubble there. Then again, there may not. Who knows? Housing. I know that housing in the houses that are being built for the people that are relocating from the urban centers to the countryside, that housing is perfectly fine. But if you're talking about, say, the Valley or downtown LA, how's that housing going to be moving forward? I don't know. I see some foreclosures on the horizon. As you saw before, we've got a lot of people in forbearance. We have a delinquency rate of plus 90 days above 3%. There is a chance that the urban centers may get hit with a housing correction. Then again, they may not. I don't know. Anything that's financed, the ultra low rates that we are experiencing today, you know, the 2.5% mortgages, the 0.9, 1.99% car loans, they're producing good returns for those people that are using that financing because it's cheap money. So out of these three, the anything financed, that's the market will probably correct itself before it gets too bubbly. The stock market, who knows? I've got a slide on the next one that is my lament. Housing, I currently rent, so I'm kind of actually waiting for the real estate in the greater LA area perhaps to go through a price correction. So, from Sir John Maynard Keynes again, markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. That's kind of the definition of a bubble, right? So, while I may see bubbles, they tend to last a lot longer than what I anticipate. So therefore, I jump out before lots of real appreciation occurs. During the tech bubble, I'm all like, this is crazy. They're not making any money. Why are the valuations of all these tech companies so high? I'm out. Missed a lot of money not being in tech during the 2000s. Sold a house during the real estate bubble before the great crash. That actually worked out pretty well. I still sold a little early. But once again, we don't know it's a bubble until it's corrected. Those that talk about, real estate's fine, they're correct for a longer time than what I anticipate, and then eventually they're not. So if you're talking about where should you invest, always, number one, invest in areas that you know and familiar with. And then number two, if you're taking risk, try and be compensated for the risk that you are taking. So those are my two final thoughts for you. So if you're going to invest in areas that you know, and make sure you're compensated for the risk that you are taking. So with that, I conclude my presentation, and thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Wesley, for that wonderful presentation. And so now we'll be opening up the floor for questions. And so you can type them into the chat, and I'll direct them to Wesley. So it looks like our first question is, how about airlines?
Yeah, airline stocks, I don't believe they're going to recover. I think that they are in for a world of hurt. I know I'm not flying. When I go visit my folks, I will be driving up to Oregon. I won't be flying. I just look at it as a cylinder petri dish in the air. I don't really think that, I know that they do wonderful things with their air filtration. I don't know how much that helps you if the guy next to you somehow is infected with COVID. But that's my personal opinion. Now, when a vaccine comes out, am I going to get the vaccine? Not the first go around. I'll probably wait for a couple cycles, maybe the fourth or fifth batch. I will get the vaccine, and then after I get the vaccine, I will fly. A lot of other people are chomping at the bit to fly, but I don't think you're going to see the volumes in airline travel through most of 2021, maybe extending into 2022.
Second question, coming from the same user, is, considering the possible bubbles in 2021, is it a good idea to buy a home?
So here's my advice on the home purchasing, and that is that if you can afford the house today, and it's the house that you want, and it's the house that you see yourself being in for a decade, for 10 years, for 20 years, by all means, it is better to buy that house today if it's affordable for you. Even if that house value goes down, all of those house values recovered during the Great Recession. So if you a little bit overpay for it now, well, you're in the house and now you have that payment locked in, and you'll feel sad in years 2 or 3 or whatever, but that house value will eventually recover. As long as you're not intending to move, buy that house today. If you are going to move in the next 3 to 5 years, you may want to consider the chance that values may go down. The only reason why the only reason why prices are up today is inventory is at all-time lows. So less inventory means, more buyers and sellers, means higher real estate prices in the local area. Eventually, those people who are in forbearance and those people who got laid off because of the employment situation, they will eventually have to give up those houses, freeing up inventory. But like I say, laws of supply and demand are always in effect. And so you're going to get more inventory, less buyers. You're going to see prices go down if that happens. I'm assuming they're going to happen. I'm assuming it's going to happen sometime in probably late 21, early 22. But once again, it may not. People who held off buying when houses were low during 2010, 11, and 12, and they haven't, because they didn't get into a house in 2012, and they were locked out for the last 8 years, they would have been better off if they would have bought the house when they could afford to. So the real question is, if you're going to be around long term and you can afford it today, by all means, I would say it's not unwise to buy a house today. If you're going to be in it for a 3 to 5 year time frame, I'm saying it's a roll of the dice from today if you're going to be able upside down or underwater 3 to 5 years from now.
So third question is asking to go back to the slide about what we should avoid to invest in.
Okay, let me go ahead and pop the share screen again and share. So as I said in my avoid screen, commercial real estate. I do not see commercial real estate recovering anytime soon. There looks like there's been a permanent shift away from anything having to do with office buildings, retail centers, shopping malls, and such. Like I say, for airlines, business travel I know is dead. That's not coming back. Hotels, your theme parks. If you're Six Flags Magic Mountain, you're kind of toast. You're not going to open up for a while. Museums and such. So your travel and tourism is dead. And then your shopping malls. So anything having to do with the shopping mall, your retailers. What happened with COVID is that COVID kind of accelerated a lot of trends. So you had a whole bunch of retailers kind of thrown off because of Amazon and online shopping. Well, the COVID accelerated that trend. So yeah, so if I was definitely going to avoid things, I would avoid commercial real estate. I would avoid anything to do with travel and tourism. I would avoid anything to do with shopping malls. I did give Isabella this presentation in a PDF form, and I'm sure she can distribute that if people are interested with that for that presentation.
So
okay.
Fourth
Any
question.
other questions regarding the presentation? Okay. So if you're talking about housing, the good news is if you own the house, you can probably sell it pretty good now. Let me jump down to that housing slide. Inventory is very low, so that means prices are high. Well, guess if inventory goes up to a more normalized level, I have to believe that housing prices are going to get a little soft. So, okay.
So yeah, we also had a fourth question about refinancing your home. So when
excellent.
In what terms is it good to refinance your home?
Okay, so when you're refinancing your house, you probably want to get a 30-year loan. It's the traditional thing that we here in America do. We do real estate lending, so you can come to the credit union. You can go online if you're more comfortable with doing it online. So either way, if you're talking about rates, in the world of loans, there's conventional financing, which is things that get sold to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They have your best rates. So they have 80% loan to value financing, if you're going to refinance. Um, uh, Probably you can get a rate in the high twos, maybe even in the mid twos, 2.5 I've seen out there for loans. If you go shorter duration, so if you go 15-year, you'll be getting a better rate. We have a 2.99% 7-year ARM, means it's fixed for 7 years and then it floats. We actually offer that on jumbos. So if you have a large need for a large loan, we try and meet that need with a 7-year ARM. It's fixed for 7 years. That's generally enough time for people to experience the positives of that 7-year loan, but none of the negatives, because generally people don't really hold home loans as long as they used to. But people still want that comfort of a 30-year mortgage. We understand that. Were they asking about rates, or were they asking about terms on that mortgage loan question?
It was about the terms.
Got it. So like I say, 30-year loans are good. If you can handle a 15-year payment, you'll get a better interest rate.
Another question surrounding interest rates
Sure.
is, are the mortgage loan rates projected to stay this low, about 3% or lower next year?
I'm going to say probably. The Federal Reserve is committed to keeping rates in general low for the foreseeable future until the economy recovers. So I am thinking that the employment situation is going to be more systemic and not recover as quickly as what other people think. Therefore, I'm thinking we're going to be experiencing a long period of low interest rates. Today, between now and the end of the year, we may hit all-time lows, but if it goes back up in 2021, it's not like it's going to go up to 5% or 4%. So today you may be able to get something for 2 3/4, 2.75, and it may go up to 3 1/4, 3.25. Now, 3 1/4 on a mortgage loan is great. You may be sad that you didn't get the 2.75, but when the last mortgage loan my parents got, in the 80s, they got it for like 13%. So historically speaking, even if rates go up a little bit on mortgages, it's still a great rate on a mortgage. If you try to time the bottom of the market, try to time the lowest interest rate, you're going to miss, because it's very, very hard to do. So the question is, are you happy with the rate? And so if you look out there today, and the rates, there are good rates out there today. If you're happy with the rate today, I wouldn't delay. Rates might be a little higher in 2021, but I wouldn't rush something today because rates might be going up, because rates aren't going to go up that much in 2021.
So we also had a little bit more of a general question, maybe more about the economy, asking what would happen if every single American decided not to work one day.
That pretty much happens every Super Bowl Sunday. Nobody works on Super Bowl Sunday. If everyone doesn't work one day, nothing happens. That's, the systems are designed to, obviously we have weekends, and a lot of people don't work on weekends. Some people do. So if everybody doesn't work one day, it would be interesting. But like I said, that's probably describes most of Super Bowl Sunday. And everybody, if it's a known thing, everybody pretty much, factors it into their schedule and away they go. If everyone's forced to not do anything for a day and it's unexpected, you're going to have a significant dislocation of work that was expected to get done on that particular day. But if you say, hey, we're not going to work 3 months from now, people won't care. If you say suddenly nobody can leave their house for 24 hours and we're going to roll, military in the streets to enforce it, that's very disruptive. So it's, once again, it's what's the expectation? If it's unexpected, it damages. If it's completely expected, it's been planned around.
Another more general topic kind of question is asking, what can I do apart from studying if I want to become an accountant, but my studies are becoming harder after shifting to an online format?
Okay, can you repeat the question again?
So it goes, what can I do apart from studying if I want to become an accountant?
Right, apart from studying. Um, if you want to become an accountant, it's, obviously you have to pass the CPA examination. But if you're looking into it, it's, becoming familiar with accounting texts. Accounting is it's a rules-based system. So learning the principles and the rules behind the debits and the credits is something that, as an accountant, you're gonna need to know and absorb. That's uh, so kind of like if you have an accounting textbook, once you've studied it and you have the conceptual format, then there are just the simple accounting rules that you will learn.
So we'll have time for one more question before we need to close things up. So if any of you guys have any last questions for Wesley, now would be the time. So can we talk about the recession?
Absolutely. I believe there will be a recession. I believe it will last a little bit longer than what other people think. It will be an employment recession that is similar to the Great Recession. Um, there is a lot of stimulus that will come to help support people, which is a good thing. Um, I don't believe that the stimulus, a lot of people think that the government spending a lot of money is going to have a highly negative effect on the economy. I don't see that. I don't think that deficits, while they matter, I think we're still significantly on this side of the deficits mattering. When we talk about recessions and the government spending and all this, the debt that the US is incurring with this stimulus packages, a lot of economists see that as a highly negative event that will hamper the economy for many, many years. I don't really see, the numbers don't appear to show the relationship between deficit spending and negative economic events as far as higher interest rates and higher inflation. In fact, it seems like those countries that have high deficits also, a lot of them, especially the westernized countries, have low interest rates and they don't have inflation. So as people, if we get a significant stimulus package that will help a lot to jumpstart the economy, but I think it's going to take a lot of time for the current dislocation to work its way through the system. In other words, we had like 40% of the restaurants shut down, and the people that work for those restaurants are no longer employed. It's not going to take a week or two for the new restaurant to come in. It's going to take months and months before a restaurant goes in, and then the next restaurant and the next restaurant. So it's going to take us, 12 to 18 months before those small businesses recover. And I do believe that the American economy won't recover until the small businesses recover. And that's going to be a while.
All right, so that is all that we're going to have time for today. And so just a couple of closing words. I'd like to thank Wesley again for being here today to deliver the presentation, and our interpreter and captionist as well for their services this afternoon. And thank everyone for attending. Thank you all for your questions. And so this is going to be our final presentation for the financial literacy series for fall 2020. Again, thank you all so much for coming. And so last thing, don't forget to remember to fill out the WUFA form so that you can be entered into the card giveaway. And that said, thank you all again for attending. And thank you so much, Wesley, and to our closed captionist and interpreter for their services this afternoon.
Well, I just want to thank Isabella doing all the coordination it took to put this on. I'm happy to do it. Like I say, if anybody needs me to talk more about accounting and what you can do to prepare, by all means, I believe my email is at the end of the presentation. Go ahead and hit me up. Be happy to do offline chats with whoever would like to do so.